Good day to all our speakers in different time zones, and good afternoon to you here in Prague. Let me welcome you to our debate called Pillar of Shame for Hong Kong and China, that is co-organized by Hong Kong NGO Day, Center Docs and Project Sinopsis. In recent years, we have seen growing pressure from PRC authorities against basic freedoms and human rights in the country, in Hong Kong, Xinjiang and Tibet, and also the projection of CCP authoritarian practices internationally. Beijing has been willing to break promises, agreements, and ignore human rights and laws, for example, in Hong Kong. The student demonstrations were suppressed, the state security law was implemented, and the Hong Kong government has changed to the city's electoral system. The situation in Xinjiang is even worse, is described by more and more people or organizations and states as a genocide. The CCP is using similar tactics that have been used in Tibet, tools to Sinicization of the region, suppression of local culture, customs and people. To discuss these actions and what the consequences might be 33 years after the Tiananmen Massacre and 3 years since the launch of the Hong Kong movement, I'm going to speak with my great honored speakers, Professor Olga Lomova from Charles University. Professor, welcome. His Excellency Lobsang Sangay, former Sinkyong Prime Minister of Tibetan government in exile. Excellency, welcome. Nury Turkel, Uyghur American attorney, public official and human rights advocate and author of the book No Escape, The True Story of China's Genocide of the Uyghurs. Nury, welcome as well. Pleasure having you here. We have another speaker here with us. There's Finn Lau, a political activist from Hong Kong and founder of Hong Kong Liberty and Stand With Hong Kong. Pleasure having you here. And also we have Zhou Fengsuo, a human rights activist and former student from Tiananmen. Welcome as well. So, pleasure to have you here all, and maybe let me pass microphone to, at first, Lobsang Sangay, Professor Lomova, and then Professor Lomova, just to summarize up what is now happening in Tibet, for Tibetan living in exile, and then I will ask the same question to Nury Turkel, Professor Lomova, and Tin. Please.
For hosting us. You know, I'm in Boston area, which is Saturday morning. Instead of having a relaxed weekend, I felt it's very important to participate in the event. Number one, because so many organizations related to Hong Kong are coming together to observe, June 4th, which is very important date, given the tragedy of the Tiananmen Square. And I could see my, brother-in-arms, Nathan, Nury and Pao and others are here. I hope we will have some sisters also joining, at least the moderator is a sister. And, this is very important for us. Instead of talking simply about Tibet, I want to perhaps broaden the issue by saying, we are fighting for democracy. And I do believe the war in Ukraine is a turning point in this global, trajectory towards democracy, because Freedom House has come out with a report which says that, for 16 consecutive years, there is regression of freedom. And also democracy is regressing in the last 2 decades. If you look at Venezuela, Maduro, and Afghanistan, 20 years of nation building, democratic building, $2 trillion spent, but collapsed in, 20 days. But all these, the regression of freedom and regression of democracy, I think the war in Ukraine has put us the world on a spot, and that what an autocrat or a dictator could and can do, the abuse of power. The Lord Acton said in the 19th century, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. What Putin is doing in Ukraine is a clear sign there is an abuse of power and invasion in broad daylight of an independent sovereign country of Ukraine. Now, our heart goes out to people who are suffering in Ukraine. They are fighting very bravely. Every day, according to President Zelensky, anywhere from 50 to 100 Ukrainians are dying. And every day, 300 to 500 Ukrainians are getting wounded in war to defend their dignity and to defend their democracy. That's the price Ukrainians are paying. And today happens to be the 100th day of war in Ukraine. Now, with that, I think the divide in the world between autocrats and democrats, I think there's a clear choice. So far, I think, rest of the world felt that, you can do business with autocrat and sometimes ignore human rights and freedom struggles. For example, our Uyghur brothers and sisters, the Hong Kongers, the Tibetans, the Taiwanese, the Mongolians, we've been saying and arguing that you can't have an appeasement policy towards autocrats. You must stand up for basic principles for freedom and human rights and democracy all along. It's not like you have either or choice. And many in Europe felt, you can do business with Putin with all the gas, the import of gas and the petrol, all that. Now, suddenly there's realization in Europe that, you simply cannot have an appeasement policy and do business and get along with an autocrat, right? I mean, that was the lesson of the Second World War too. Many say that the Prime Minister Chamberlain had an appeasement towards Hitler and he got emboldened and that led to the Second World War. So I think Europe is learning, and unified Europe to come to defend democracy in Ukraine is a pivotal moment. And we all should rally around this and send a clear message. Yes, there has been regression of freedom. There has been regression of democracy in the last 2 decades, but this is a turning point. And we, the activists, I've been an activist and I've been an academic, I've been a leader or politician for the last 3 some decades now. So I can say with some, legitimacy that I've seen from all 3 angles how geopolitics and real politics function. Now is the moment for democracy to push forward. And that is why I feel today's event, organized by so many Hong Kong related groups, democracy advocates in Prague, is very important, because Václav Havel wrote Charter 77 and it became a reality, right? In Czech Republic, as well as in general, Eastern European countries. Now, our, brother in arms, unfortunately, who passed away late, wrote Charter 08, which we all must, push forward and advocate freedom for Hong Kong, Taiwan, Mongolians, Uyghurs, and Chinese brothers and sisters. And in that context, all of us coming together in one place, even though we all are coming together virtually, it is very important, because one, scheme or strategy the Chinese government is very good at is divide and rule. So I could see so many Hong Kong groups coming together. This is very important. Now, if they could have an umbrella organization of all Hong Kong groups, like Tibetans, we have Central Tibet Administration, under great leadership and vision of His Holiness Dalai Lama, like the Uyghurs have World Uyghur Congress, Similarly, if all the Hong Kongers could have a similar umbrella organization, and all of us, the victims of autocratic system, coming together and sharing our experience is very, very, very important. So I've been to Prague many times, and they know the issue of Tibet very well. So I did not elaborate that more than 150 some Tibetans have committed self-immolations, burned themselves, as recently as 2 months ago, 2 of them, right? So situation in Tibet is tragic, and our situation is as tragic as our brothers and sisters of Uyghur brothers and sisters or Mongolians, right? And similarly, Hong Kongers. And that's why we all have to be vigilant about what is going to happen in Taiwan as well, because it's very likely in 2024, DPP is likely to win again. If that happens, then the trend of people in Taiwan is that they are embracing democracy fully. And that will be a similar situation of Zelensky winning election in Ukraine. And that put some pressure on Putin to act on, like he's acting on with war in Ukraine. What will happen in Taiwan post 2024 election? So when that happens, if that happens, what should we do? I say this not with confidence, but with concern, because in November of 2019, at Halifax Security Forum, with Emily Lau and Figo Chan, they were the recipient of the award. I said the same thing. In November, I said by Christmas, Chinese government act in Hong Kong, and the rest of the world, what will they do? They will issue press releases, they will have parliamentary resolutions and statement of support, and then nothing much will happen, So I was early by 6 months. By June of 2020, 6 months later, you can ask Emily Lau, and my friend Dorkom Issa was also there in that panel. It was closed door panel. It happened. So unfortunately, with brothers and sisters of Hong Kong, you all are in exile like us. We've been there a lot longer than you all, but we have some experience, good and bad, that we can share with you all. With that in mind, I think all of us coming together and speaking out about freedom and democracy and showing solidarity is very, very important. So good to see Nathan Law and all others, Hong Kong groups at the venue. I'm the best, and our solidarity and support is with you all the time. So with that, I'll end, and then looking forward to hearing other co-panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you, Excellency. And now let me pass the virtual microphone to Nury Turkel. And Nury, if I may ask you to be really short because we are running out of time. I'm so sorry. Thank you, please. We can't hear you. The microphone is off probably. There's some technical problem.
Oh, I got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good.
So much. Thank you. So nice to be participating in this panel. I'd like to start by thanking Fengsuo and my friend Lobsang Sangay for their leadership, protecting human rights and promoting democratic rights for all in China-related areas. I am in the I'm away from home, like Lobsang. I was planning to enjoy my weekend, but this is nothing more important than participate in this discussion. I've been living and breathing in these issues for more than 20 years now. I started advocating for the Uyghur people right after 9/11 when I was a law student, working on my JD in Washington, D.C. I never thought that it will get this bad. I do know, unlike most Americans, most Western business and political leaders, I never believed that pampering them with compliments, providing technology, business opportunities, and investment, post June 4th massacre, the conventional wisdom or expectation, fanciful expectation was that China will become one of us. It didn't happen. And I did believe that someone in the Chinese leadership or someone with a fair, objective mindset who cares for the future of China and Chinese people might be doing the right thing. That was my expectation, realistic expectation. But I did not expect that China will commit a genocide in a broad daylight, as it has been the case in the last 6 years. We just witnessed the third trove of first-hand evidence. The first two were leaked, but this one is hacked into the Chinese police file. There are close to 3,000 faces, actual human beings, that the international community have learned about through the news reports witness testimonies and the camp survivors' account. But now we have the faces. When you look at the faces, you'll be surprised. I'm sure that you have looked at it. You know, I'm pretty active on social media. I didn't even have the stomach to put out a tweet after seeing those faces. Mothers, daughters, and kids. You know, someone looked like somebody that I grew up in my neighborhood in Kashgar, because this is a particular region, and that trove of evidence being leaked out is around the area that I was born and raised in the city of Kashgar. And what I struggled to find out, what struggled to come to grip with reality, is that even with that kind of evidence being put out, we have not heard anything tangible from the Western capitals. And I wholeheartedly agree with my friend appeasement. That appeasement is still underway. It's still ongoing, particularly in Western Europe, particularly in the sub-corners of the United States, specifically in the business and tech sector. So despite all of this is happening in the last 33 years, I can't think of anything positive that I can report. We were paying the price of appeasement then. It is still the same thing. But should we give up? I don't think so. I am optimistic about the future because, as Lobsang alluded, the Ukrainian crisis, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, I think it will be a turning point for three reasons. One, now international communities, for the second time after Newell Chamberlain and Winston Churchill, woke up to this brutal regime, both in Moscow and Beijing. They're supporting each other in this illegal war. And they're trying to change the world. They're trying to destroy the rules-based international order. They try to normalize their form of governance through surveillance, through slave labor, through genocide. Now the international community have to ask themselves if they will be okay with another type of atrocity, now supported with slave labor and supported with technology. And then two, the Chinese leadership, since particularly in the last decade, particularly since Xi Jinping came to power, that this is the China will rule the world, the West taking, the alliances is their king, everything is going down the hill. Now, with the kind of unity in Europe in particular, in response to Putin's invasion, Chinese leaders, from their own observation that the Western liberal democracies are not dead. The unity is still possible to push back against. If the United States and its allies can manage to have more than 100 businesses in Russia to be sanctioned, forced to suspend their practices or pull out, then this would be a bad news for China. If China does something outrageous in remotely similar nature as Putin, listening and watching, observing the events unfolding, in particularly a cross-Atlantic alliance. And then third, some point down the road, the American people, American policymakers need to ask themselves, what is the price of sacrificing dissidents when it's inconvenient? John McCain wrote in 2017.
I think, Nury, we are losing you.
That we cannot depend on and dump them when it's inconvenient.
Yeah, I
hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
I'm almost done. So, I want to conclude.
I'm sorry, Nury, we can't even.
The genocide did yet. His regime is still planning. You can't hear me anymore?
Yes, so if I can ask you for a short conclusion, let's see if
Yes.
the signal is working.
Yes, I would like to conclude by stating a few things. The international community, did not have to wake up to this regime through genocide in East Turkestan, upending of Hong Kong democracy, and daily threat to Taiwan. And also, I worry that the same level of brutality that the Uyghur people have experienced might be the future for the Tibetan people. I worry that some of the slave labor practices already been part of the Tibetan repression by the CCP. And I call on the international community, stop thinking that what we're dealing with, what we have been advocating is not a typical human rights concern. This is a global concern. This is about us. What kind of future do we want? What kind of relationship that we will have with countries like China? We need to ask ourselves how many genocide that we would like to see.
Thank you very much, Nury. Thank you. Let's try the third connection. I mentioned before that today we are commemorating the victims of the massacre at the Tiananmen Square 33 years ago. And for this occasion, we have here with us Zhou Fengsuo, a Chinese human rights activist and former student leader during the Tiananmen Square protest of 1989. And he was listed number 5 on the government's most wanted list and forced into the exile in the United States. So I should say also good morning to US. And Feng Shuo, maybe please, could you tell us what happened in June 1989 in Beijing and some other cities in China, and how the PRC government reacted and how people are commemorating the Tiananmen victims and the massacre these days? If I might ask again for a short summary. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you all for gathering together to commemorate this most important date in China's history. For me, this was has been a date of tragic sadness, but it's also a day of great hope, of persistence, against this overwhelming power of this digital totalitarian regime that's looming threat to the world at every level. And I think both Lobsang and Nury have explained the situation very well. I'll just talk more from my personal experience. 33 years ago, I was a student at Tsinghua University. Later, I was elected as the member representing Tsinghua University at the student union that was the leadership for the protests. The event was triggered by the death of Hu Yaobang, Communist Party leader before, and he was removed because he was more open-minded, sympathetic to the student. I was the first one to offer flower wreaths to him on Tiananmen Square, and later, at the time of the massacre, 33 years ago, I was the last one to leave Tiananmen Square among the last group. To me, this was the most important moment in my life in China's history. That all of a sudden, people saw a different China. Millions of people coming out to Tiananmen Square, to cities all over the country. More than 400 cities, there were protests. Tens of millions active participants. And it was like eruption of a volcano that was repressed so deep, so tightly, but all of a sudden it erupted, and with such force and brilliance that was watched by the world. That's a kind of image we remember today, the image of the tankman, the image of the Statue of Democracy. And of course, to people like me, this was the day that I remember Chinese people love freedom and they're willing to sacrifice their life for it. And China's democratization, this is the will of these people who died on that day. That's what we are commemorating today. For last 33 years, we have seen, because China took on a wrong path, that was such a regime that lost its legitimacy completely by using tanks and machine guns on its own people in its own capital, was embraced by the democracies around the world, and in the process becoming much more powerful influence. Today, I think today, China without democracy is in many ways very similar to Nazi Germany in the earlier years leading up to World War II. And in many ways, they are even stronger. Nazi Germany was more constrained geographically now, but China has influence. For example, in Europe, in Serbia, there are Chinese workers there that's living like camps, and through one belt, one road, they are having influence everywhere. And of course, more importantly, through trade and technology, their shadow is all over the world. Even in the United States, our commemoration has always been censored by US technology companies because they received directly orders from Chinese security agent. And this was evidenced by FBI indictment of this Zoom employee, the very platform we are using now. There's this person, Jin Xinjiang, who was a Zoom employee, but he was getting orders as a Chinese state security agent to give it to US companies. That's the reality we are facing now. So this is a day of commemoration. It's for now, it's an opportunity for all of us to be united again for the common goal for freedom and for China's democracy. Thank you.
So thank you very much for these words. And I said that we have the representatives of Hong Kong movement here, so now let me pass the microphone to Finn Lau. And Finn, maybe what have been the recent developments in Hong Kong? Can you maybe tell us what the situation about the situation there as you watch it unfold? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Finn Lau. I'm one of the several Hong Kong advocates in exile, officially warranted under the Hong Kong national security law by the Hong Kong and Beijing governments. So the recent development in Hong Kong is that, well, we have lost literally all civil liberties, rule of law, autonomy, and even democracy in Hong Kong. So this year, we will mark the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong handover. And under the Hong Kong handover agreement between the UK and China, Hong Kong should be guaranteed with at least 50 years of no change, guaranteed autonomy, democracy, and many different civil liberties. But even before hitting such a 25th milestone, we have lost everything. So this is the situation in Hong Kong. And in year 2021, we have lost more than 50 civil society organizations. So for example, for those international NGOs like Amnesty International, they used to use Hong Kong as the regional headquarters. And even for that scale, a large scale of international NGOs, they had to withdraw from Hong Kong. So Amnesty International, they closed their Hong Kong office last year. And then right now, we also lost the top 3 independent news media outlets in Hong Kong: Apple Daily, Stand News, and Citizen Press. So literally, we got no freedom of press in Hong Kong as well. That's why we are facing the crisis of a broken linkage between the local Hong Kongers and those Hong Kongers overseas. I think that this is something that Tibetan and Uyghurs are also facing, because for the Uyghurs, they are facing genocide. which is being recognized by many different national parliaments. And for Tibetan, like the Dalai Lama has said, they are facing cultural genocide. So right now in Hong Kong, we are facing something very, very similar. We have got the issue in the education system because they are trying to eradicate Cantonese, which is our mother tongue, from the education system. They try to teach Mandarin, force the next generation to use Mandarin as their mother tongue. And even for the Education Bureau head of that bureau, they declare that, or he claimed that Cantonese is not our mother language. This is totally ridiculous. So this is what they are doing. And it is very, very important to preserve the identity of Hong Konger. Because, well, to preserve the identity of Hong Konger, we have to preserve our culture, we have to preserve our language, we have to preserve our history. And by doing, and by eradicating language, then it's very, very difficult for us to maintain our identity. So right now, we got so many different Hong Kong diaspora groups all over the world, maybe in the UK, Canada, Australia, and many different democratic countries, try to preserve our own language. And then in Hong Kong, although there may not be any large-scale protests at the moment, but well, I would say that many Hong Kongers, we are still trying to preserve our soul, our culture. For example, in Hong Kong, there is a new trend. We try to use history as a way to bypass censorship. The censorship that has been imposed in Hong Kong, say, in terms of movie industry, on books, on press, in newspapers, in many different aspects. So history is maybe our last civic space to maneuver. So in Hong Kong in the 1945, we got the so-called Hong Kong Liberation Day, because at that time Hong Kong was annexed by the Japanese army, and then the UK came and then somehow liberate Hong Kong. So right now we try to talk about this or rediscover this part of story or history, such that we could say that, or we could hope that, well, there will be the second liberation of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong will be free someday. And actually, I am a rather optimistic advocate when compared to other people. Maybe for some people, they may claim that they are forever or permanently in exile, but I would never say that. Yes, maybe in short or to mid-run, I am in exile, but I believe, say, maybe in 20 years of time, then I must be able to go back to Hong Kong. Right now, of course, I can go back to Hong Kong, but I could just exercise such right, because once I landed on the Hong Kong airport, I would be jailed and put into the jail for the rest of my life. So I don't see that the Chinese Communist Party is not defeatable. Yeah, because if we say many different democratic countries could adopt a correct strategy, say imposing collective sanction on the Chinese regime, if we could drain their economic resources, just like what we are doing towards the Russian regime, then I would say that we got the chance to lead to or maybe to witness the collapse of the Chinese government. So this is something that we are trying very hard to fight for. And I think that maybe perhaps the Ukraine war could be a wake-up call to many different democratic countries, not just the West, maybe even include those Eastern countries like Japan or Korea, because, well, we can't have a heavy reliance on the Chinese market. And I believe a true globalization should be relying on a group of trading partners, say maybe African countries, maybe Southeast Asian countries, instead of a single, assertive, aggressive trading partner, that is China. So that's why this is a good and critical timing to do something towards China. And in Hong Kong, and for those people outside Hong Kong, we are still resisting the influence and the invasion of the Chinese government. We are trying very hard, and we will not surrender.
Thank you very much, Finn. That was slightly optimistic, but we heard that the situation it's worsening everywhere. So maybe let me now ask one question to Professor Lomova, and then I will give floor to you, because we are here for debate, and because of this, due to some bad organization, I still want to keep the same schedule and give you the floor to ask questions. So please, if you have any questions, prepare them. But now I will use my chance to ask at least one to Professor Lomova. And maybe I would like to ask, why do you think that the Communist Party wants to completely erase the memory of Tiananmen Massacre and all events like this from the memory of the Chinese people. And is their attempt successful, would you say? Please.
Well, the reasons may be multiple. The obvious reason is that it was a big shame for the communist government to use guns and tanks against its own people who actually did not want to overthrow the government. They wanted dialogue. This is the key word of the protest. They wanted dialogue with the government. They wanted opening up. So this is the obvious reason and historical reason. I think I have also another reason for that, and this is that the political system, which seems to be so powerful in China, is basically an unnatural political system. Every human being needs freedom and some dignity and personal involvement with the things around human being. But the political system is a very strange, in the People's Republic, is a very strange construct, very well described by George Orwell in his visionary novel, 1984, unfortunately visionary novel. And the political system itself cannot accept that people would like to have freedom beyond the system. So it's not just a matter of erasing this event, which was a phase lost for the Communist Party. It's somehow a need to erase the very memory of need or awareness of need of being free and being for myself as a human being. And this is the same reason behind the Uyghur genocide and the persecution of the Uyghurs. The government, the political system somehow needs all people to be united as small units in the big machine of the government and of the state, and just don't want them to think about the nature, the human nature they have inside, which is to be free and to be to have some space of one's own. So I think this is the reason. Is it successful? I don't know. I think freedom is given to us when we are born. It's simply you just follow small kids and you see that any human beings, Chinese and Czech and American, they want to be free and they are somehow shaped by the society. I think Chinese people also have the need for freedom deep in their heart. And even if the memory of Tiananmen Massacre is indeed suppressed in the public sphere, I think the reason which is behind suppressing the memory cannot be suppressed and will erupt again in better or worse shape. But it will have to come because the political system as it exists in China is simply unnatural. It is against human nature. Unfortunately, it is so powerful that the future eruption for the need of freedom may be very painful and very tragic for many people. Yeah, so this is my comment on the memory of Tiananmen. And if you watch the documentaries and read about the Tiananmen events, what you see there is the need for freedom. This is the basic message of the Tiananmen events.
Thank you, Professor. So we have 5 minutes. So let me send one microphone, and I can see questions in the first row. So Simon will be the first one, then I will ask Iveta for the second, and maybe we will manage even third question. So please.
So thank you, very wonderful insight. Just one quick question. So suppose you would know, like, what happens in Ukraine is really interconnected with what happened in Hong Kong. So about weeks ago, that's the New York Times editorial, and even Henry Kissinger Also, they said it's better to for Ukrainian people to give up their lands to Russia for peace. So what do you think about this? And what do you think about the tactics, for example? Is it possible that we safeguard democracy and we need to make some necessary compromise with some aggressor? Or you think we should not compromise, but what's the result and what's the outcome? And it's always the questions even to China that whether should we engage with China or not. So we did like decades ago, but what happened in Hong Kong, but what next that we need to rethink the diplomatic policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Do you want to ask all of our speakers? Maybe if they could answer quickly, we can do the round.
Maybe professors in Charles and also Finn Lau. Thank you.
Well, for the issue of engagement, I think it could work only if it were not corrupting. Engagement, of course, it's good to have dialogue with the other side and to engage the other side, but you have to show the other side that you will stand firm for your principles. If you don't do it, you get corrupted and only the other side benefits. And we saw it, all decades of engagement with People's Republic of China made the system even more suppressive. Yeah. And for Henry Kissinger, well, maybe he's an old man. I think I would make one comment. He doesn't see other countries than the big ones. He sees United States, Russia, China, and the others should somehow be obedient. Maybe he is realistic, and the future of the small countries is decided by the big countries, but at the same time, it's worse to resist, and some countries do manage to resist. And I think it's very cynical to say to the Ukrainians, give your land to the Russians. This is something they should consider themselves if they think this will bring peace and will help to solve the problem.
Thank you. Finn, please.
Yeah, I totally disagree with the appeasement policy or the so-called engagement policy adopted by the US government or many other countries between the 1980s and 2019. So before 2019, they used to try to engage the Chinese Communist Party. They tried to make some kind of a good trade agreement with them, free trade agreement with them, such that maybe they can make China rich, such that maybe the other people will try to push for democracy or democratic reform inside China. But in the end, we know that approach is not realistic. With more resources, with more money, they simply suppress more people, including Tibetan, Uyghurs, and Hong Kongers. And now maybe they are trying to, and they may try to annex or invade Taiwan very soon. We don't know when that will come. So I don't believe in the so-called engagement policy. Rather, we should starve the CCP. We should drain their financial resources such that they may not exert their aggressive geopolitical influence towards other countries. So that is my stance. And in terms of compromise or so-called negotiation, well, say 30 years ago, the UK government and the Hong Kongers, actually, we got an upper hand in terms of negotiation. But in the end, we make some kind of a compromise towards the Beijing regime. In the end, Hong Kong was stripped away from the UN colonialists, and that's why we got the right of self-determination. We don't have the right to voice out. We don't have the right to choose our own future. So that's why we got the tragedy of 2019. If we didn't compromise back in, say, 1984 or 1983, then Hong Kong will not suffering like this. And right now, Hong Kongers and Ukrainian, we are using our blood to tell the world that we should never trust China and we should change from using the so-called engagement policy towards a tough China policy instead.
Thank you, Finn.
Maybe, can I make a
Lobsang,
point?
Excellency, please, if you can shortly answer.
Yes, I think, we are not against doing business with China, But what we are saying is, while you do business with China, don't be silent on freedom, human rights, and democracy. You know, now Europe should learn from Ukraine. You engaged with Russia, you bought all the gas and the oil from Russia, and where did it lead to, right? So learning from Ukraine, you should know the price you have to pay when you engage with autocrats with your eyes closed. So we've been in the streets asking for freedom and democracy for all these years. And, so that's what we are, trying to remind everybody.
Thank you. Maybe Nury, may I ask for last words? If the signal is working.
I agree with all of my co-panelists that the engagement was a failure. But we cannot talk about something that is not part of the U.S. policy to see how things work out. Recently, Secretary of State Tony Blinken delivered a China policy speech. He articulated U.S. government's policy approach with respect to China with investment, alignment, and competition. So the alignment aspect included human rights. So the U.S. government is actively, has been engaging and will be engaging with our like-minded allies and partners to push back against China. But there's a slight difference in my approach to China today, that I don't think that business as usual should be the new norm. We cannot continue to treat China as another normal state while it's engaging genocide in East Turkestan and implementing these repressive, brutal policies against Tibetans, and also appended successfully, quote unquote, in Hong Kong democracy. This is not over yet for Hong Kong people, and we don't even know what will happen to Taiwan. We can imagine what will happen, but these are the things that has a consequences. The United States, a farmer's son in Iowa did not know about Hitler's plans for the Jewish people. And then once the world find out that farmer's son ended up sacrificing his life. When something goes bad in China, if the status quo continues, if you continue to look the other way, try to normalize Chinese government's behavior, normalize CCP leadership's vision for the world, then, in the future, sending few javelins will not be able to take care of the problem. So this is a not only soul-searching moment, but this is also a moment for policymakers and global leaders to grow some backbone and take a look at the mirror and see what kind of future that we wanted to create for the next generation.
Thank you, Nury. And I'm really sad that I have to quit this amazing debate right now. But I hope that I will have a chance maybe soon with His Excellency, with Nury Turkel. We lost Fengsuo, but he was here with us, with Professor Lomova, with Finn Lau, with Simon Chen, and other great speakers to continue this debate and talk more. For now, thank you very much to the organizer on the NGO Day. Thank you very much, Docs, for hosting us, Project Sinopsis. And I would like to wish you have a nice weekend. And sorry to those that we ruin your weekend on this on this online debate. Thank you again. Goodbye.
All good.
Thank you.
Thank you.